Welcome to the show. Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody podcast, episode 22.
22. I love the number 22. You want to know why?
I do.
Sigma Gamma Rho, a wonderful sorority, founded 1922. This year will be the centennial year, 100 years old, and 22 is in my soul.
Oh, my goodness. Indiana love.
Indiana love. Why do you say Indiana love? I mean,
as you know, I'm a member of the best fraternity there is, ever was, and ever will be. Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated.
Nope. Oh.
There we go.
All right.
So, those of you that know us, love us, know that this is our 10-year anniversary. So we think it's appropriate that we focus this year on subjects that are near and dear to us and give you a closer and intimate look on, what's made this past 10 years work out for us.
Yeah. So the title of this episode 22 is It's Not Personal, It's Marriage. Dun, dun, dun. So, it's similar to like when someone says it's not personal, it's business. So it's what made you came up with this whole thing? Like what sparked this? You came up with this episode.
Well, it's interesting you ask that. One of my best friends, Josh Locks, his dad, rest in peace, Mr. David Locks. But before we got married, he gave us his own form of marriage counseling in terms of helping us with estate planning. And the very first thing I heard him say, he told us is like, hey, I want you to know that this is a business transaction. Don't ever think it's anything but that. And if you don't have your business together, this won't work. And then he proceeded to tell us all the warm, lovey-dovey stuff and how we needed to make sure that if I die, Joy has an easier time getting my money. That's really the benefit of marriage. But it was a real conversation because it helped put things in perspective. So we're going to go through 4 reasons as to why your marriage is a business. And we're going to dive right in. So reason number 1, the law says so.
The law.
The long arm of the law says so. So, just to break down, the legal system doesn't care if you love each other, if you don't. As we've seen, it's expanded. Gay or straight, it's the law says so. If it's permissible, you are now in a business relationship with your spouse, and it's going to make sure both of you abide by the law.
Yeah, and just like a story that I have, or to build off of that, is both my parents got divorced, and my dad was like paying back child support for like years. He was like bitter. It was a lot, and it was like court ordered. It's like nothing you could do. And then if you read the Will Smith book, which is a really good book, he talks about how his parents get divorced and how like even though they signed the divorce papers 20 years after they separated, like his dad still owed child support, and Will Smith was like an adult. So it's like the law keeps track of everything. It has no mercy. There's no grace. There's no empathy. Like, it is what it is. So I just think that's why people can get married at court. Like, you can go to court and get married. It's like a transaction.
Exactly. You need a marriage certificate. You need to get licensed to do it. You go to City Hall and you get
City Hall.
Yeah. Court, City Hall, whatever, to get the documentation before you walk down the aisle. Even if you're doing a beautiful tropical vacation in the Dominican or Mexico or wherever, most of those places require you to go down there, be there for 3 days, and then you get your license, and then you can do your ceremony, right? So it's all a business transaction. All the money that's spent, creating that union, and then all the money that it takes to end that union, it's all business transactions. So you're setting yourself up beforehand or afterhand. And one of the interesting things Joy and I learned, we just sold a house last week.
Woo-woo.
And, one of the documents, even though, for strategic reasons, the house was 100% in my name, it leveraged my credit and whatnot. We went to sell the house, and our lawyer said, hey, Joy, I need you to sign one paper. And it says that you are okay as my spouse with this sale moving forward. It's not that you had necessarily had any legal claim on said home, but a buyer wants to know that the spouse has no issue with this home moving on, because you can come back 20 years down the road, it might not be successful, but you can lay claim to that property as my spouse, or if you want to be bitter. So if you were like bitter down the line, of say if something happened, you can come back and do it because that's clearly happened. So again, property is 100% in my name. It's technically it's my interest as far as the bank is concerned. Any liabilities were in my name, any insurance claims in my name, but as far as our lawyer is concerned, it was that.
Yeah, it has to be done, you know.
And again, we started this whole conversation with a great David Locke story. I think the one thing you have to understand with marriage, even if you are married, we don't think about it, especially black folks, and I don't want to categorize, but estate planning, it's such a huge and key thing. Like Joy and I still don't, even though we've talked about it, we've had conversations, we still don't have our
ducks in a row,
and all that stuff, all of our ducks in a row. You have to make sure, being married, it just makes it that much easier to get to your spouse's money in the event of their untimely passing. But because of laws and the way things are set up, you have to make sure that you're covered and you're protected, and your spouse and your family and your loved ones are protected. So you get into the life insurance policies, you get into, your properties, and, whether both of your names are on the mortgage or one person's name is on the mortgage, or one person's name is on the deed, and who lays claim to that. Like making sure that, your bank accounts, like who's your, who has power of attorney over your accounts once you pass,
Yeah, even the medical component.
Exactly, medical stuff, right? Like in the eyes of the law, and I didn't know this, my sisters are my next of kin on my bank accounts, because I opened my bank accounts when, I did one of those junior saver accounts when I was in like second grade. And
you have to change that up.
Yeah, it's been updated since then. But when we first had this conversation, both of my sister Melody, who's she's the middle child, but she's the one closest to me. She was named my first of kin, and then my next sister was named second of kin, because it just made sense as an 8-year-old to make your sisters. But that count, I started it at Uptown National, and it eventually became Chase, right? Chase had her still on file.
Oh, wow.
While we were being married. So, that would have set up, regardless of you being my spouse, that would potentially have set up a legal battle with you, my wife, and my sister. And the law doesn't care whether I'm close with my sister or not, whether, my income was used to support you, the kids, or whatever. Like this legal piece of paper is now saying this.
And the only thing, just to build on it, is I used to work as a bill collector for Chase. Like mentioning Chase, like that was my best college job. No lie, I love that job, because it would be mad perks if you like collected that money. But anyways, I was a bill collector, and so many times I would be calling spouses, and they would be heated because they would be divorced, they would be split up, and they would still owe that money. Their name would be like, their spouse would have randomly bought a boat or something like that. It would be like a boat, a car, just like random, a motorcycle, and they would be like, I've been separated or divorced from them for 7 years. Why are you calling me? And I would have to tell them, because I'm from Wisconsin, like, yo, you're in a community property state. Whatever debt they get, you're responsible for it. So just bringing up the debt as well, what the law says. So whatever state you're in, you may be responsible for that debt, whether you're together or not. So that's another component about the law says so.
Exactly. I know several people who you might know who are legally divorced. You would never know because it's on paper, but because of certain debt assumptions and certain strategies, they're on paper, they're divorced because it made more financial sense. And it's, people use it as a maneuver. It's not, it becomes cheaper to sometimes get divorced and stay together depending on what you're doing, especially when people were buying houses and upside down on their houses. It just made more sense to get a paper divorce. I think what's also interesting when you think about, the law saying so, the tool of bankruptcy. I know, and it's a little bit harder now, they shifted the laws, but I know couples who used to strategically file for bankruptcy every 7 years because you could. But all the debt would be under one person's name. So, this one family, the husband was a doctor, the wife stayed at home, so every bill was just in her name, and she would file for bankruptcy every 7 years, and she had been doing that for 30 years.
Wow.
it gave them a fresh start. So I think this is a good transition to reason number 2. So reason number 1, the law says so. That's why your marriage is a business. Reason number 2, the money says so. The money.
The money.
She has money. Let her have it all. So when you think about marriage, right, the biggest financial decisions in your life will happen with your spouse. So if you're not compatible business partners, that marriage is going to fall apart. And I think, Joy, you made a great point talking about being a bill collector. The amount of secret debt or secret purchases that happen, large volume secret, large, dollar amount secret purchases that happen in a marriage, and how it happens in secret or unbeknownst to another partner.
Yeah, and something that I researched and looked into is there is a such thing as financial infidelity. It's like a term. A lot of people don't really know about it, but people will say like, oh, the person was financial infidelity, meaning that they're keeping secrets from your spouse dealing with the money, whether it's how you're spending the money, whether it's where the money is actually going, what you're buying with the money. And it can really be a strong form of betrayal or like somebody could have a whole bunch of money and you didn't know about that. Like I've heard of couples where they get divorced and the spouse has like hundreds of thousands of dollars and they knew nothing about it. Like that is a form of it. It's just like interesting. So I would say like going back to the money, like marriage is a business. It's like you should know the budget. You should know like those line items. And when you don't, like that can cause huge problems as well.
Exactly, right? If you think about it, Joy, this is year 10. We've purchased 2 homes together. We've kept car purchases separate, but we've only purchased 3 cars in this 10 years. And then your car payments are significant. And then your child care and any education costs, those are significant. I mean, I think a lot of us, when the pandemic hit, we looked at our monthly expenses. Our mortgage and our child care were our 2 most expensive line items. And during the pandemic, child care went away, and then a lot of people were able to suspend mortgages. I think some married couples, it actually took off a little bit of pressure and made things a little bit easier and easier to get along because you weren't worried about those significant decisions. Also, I think, when you talk about significant financial decisions, you think, people start businesses. And I know people who have taken money from their spouse, have taken money from their spouse's 401ks, forged signatures, or before you used to get email notifications, things we take for granted. Now a lot of those things are in place because I have family members whose husbands, who now ex-husbands, actively went into their account, forged documentation, brought it in to whomever, and they said, "Oh wow, you have $40,000 sitting there. That's my money. I'm gonna make it grow by starting this business." And then the business failed, so now this person's retirement is jacked up, and now their husband is effectively committed, wire fraud.
Credit is jacked up.
So I think when you think about having a partner, would you go in business with a partner who has that type of history or that type of capability to like kind of fuck you over? The answer is no. So why would you marry somebody like that?
That's the mic drop on that one.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah, but I mean, the only thing I would say just to further build upon it is like a lot of marriages is one thing that started this conversation and the thought of this podcast for me. This episode was we were discussing why some couples were like still together. We were just like, why are they together? Like it's a horrible relationship. Like what's keeping them together? And money will keep people together because it's like a big deal. And also I think money is like one of the number one reasons marriages break up. Like I feel like for us, the two of us, like some of our biggest arguments and issues are centered primarily about money. Like if that wasn't an issue, or like varying opinions or varying thoughts on how it should be spent or used or whatever,
Absolutely.
Like, that's been some of our biggest conflicts. So, I mean, I think when you think about money as a business transaction, instead of bringing like the emotion into it, or last time they did this or this time they did that, sometimes it can go a lot smoother because it's just like, it's business. Like, these bills got to get paid no matter what. How they get paid is subjective, but you know what I mean? It's like some stuff just got to get done. And that might help with some of the arguments that you may be having. Or
Yeah, and I think too you have to have, I think the couples that you see staying together, even though it doesn't seem like they should, they have a vision, they have a plan, and that plan is coming to life. And you might be witnessing like the tough time, but they're gonna come out on the other side of it. When somebody's in the first 3 to 5 years of starting a new business, you might see the couple struggle, but year 6, 7, when the business takes off, you see the happiness, you see the sacrifice that they both put in pay off. It's good to see that stuff come on the other end. I think, Joy, the point you were just making about, couples, about couples staying together, I think it's interesting. What do you like in terms of financial, like what are you bringing into the relationship, right? I think there's like a level of, transparency that marriages or relationships don't start with, right? And I think that's why that, period when you're engaged, and I liked us living together. I like giving it for us, because it's so much on the line these days because our society is set up to be 2-income families. It's very rare you can have one person work at home without significant stress or like sacrifice that you have along the way. We'll get into it more later, but I think, understanding what you are walking in with, what your partner's walking in with, and understanding where you want to go. I feel like that's, something we could have, looking back, probably been a little bit smarter about, spoke more about like in year 5, we want to be here, year 10 here, year 15 here. And I feel like at year 10, we're starting with it. We're starting with where we want to be. Yeah. It's worked out for us. It's worked out really well for us, on the onset. We're still here. But we ran into an issue less than a year ago. I mean, I'll say that, I had an opportunity to purchase a car that was gonna be at a very, very good price. I think, Joy didn't have an issue with me getting a car per se, but an issue with like, well, where is this money coming from, and how are we affording this? And I said, well, I haven't had a car note in 5 years. I've been putting that money to the side and saving it, for rainy day, and the rainy day has come. But it just created conflict because I think I didn't verbalize my plan and my approach, over those 5 years. I was just used to operating my business how I had operated my business 30 years prior to being with Joy. And even though we had been married 8, 9 years at this point, I was still kind of operating as an independent operator and not really as a partner, right? And, I see why Joy was frustrated with the purchase. And I think, Joy also, at the same time got to look into like, you know what? My husband is capable of saving money and getting from point A to point B. Why isn't he applying this more to we, not me?
Oh, okay. Well, all right. I have no words. No, I'm just kidding. But no, yeah, I mean, I think the other component of it is just like people, like how you said, you had 30 years of dealing with your money. Mm-hmm. I had 30 years of dealing with mine. And I think the money is a really big thing. It's like it can have a lot of dysfunction attached to it that was there. Maybe the way your parents used money was dysfunctional. And now you're using money in that same way, and then you're bringing it to the marriage, and you're thinking that, like, really the way people view money is, like, not the same. And I think in a lot of ways people assume that it's more similar than it actually really is. And I think a lot of people, like, brush over money because they're like, well, okay, she pays her bills, I pay my bills. She's not in collections, I'm not in collections. We're on the same page, but it's like, it's a lot of little like things that can be misaligned that can lead to like a lot of arguments. Like, for instance, when he purchased the car, my issue wasn't really with the car. It was like, hey, let's not make large decisions without talking about it first, you know? And I think I didn't think of that non-negotiable until it occurred. Like, sometimes you don't even realize this is an issue for you until it occurs.
Exactly. And that's like the perfect segue into reason number 3, your marriage is a business. And that's because your spouse says so.
It's not personal, it's marriage.
Exactly.
Marriage.
So reason number 3, your spouse says so. Really, your spouse is a strategic partner. So this means you're going to encounter opportunities and or problems the two of you will need to solve. Most of these problems will involve money, and your ability to leverage your respective strength will be key in making things move, right? So, you know, to the point that Joy was making, like in her mind, she's thinking, I don't want to make any large purchases without having complete alignment, right? So there is, you know, in her head, there was probably 10 to 12 things that we needed to check the box on before we move forward with any large purchase, whether it was a vehicle, really even, you know, a flat screen TV, which is significantly less. You know, in my head, I was thinking, well, I've been saving this money for 5 years. The opportunity is here, and it's going to save money in the long run. I don't really see what the issue was. And eventually, you know, after 3 months, you know, I did move forward and purchase a vehicle. 5. It was 5 months, right? So in my mind, it's even more time to stack even more money. So if you know, when and if something happens, well, we have a bigger reserve war chest, and we've had to tap into that war chest for a few things. But I think what it taught us is, right, each partner is going to have a different strength, right? When you think about a business, not everybody is bringing the same thing to the table. Not everybody, you know, I work at an ad agency, right? And the way ad agencies or law firms are constructed, some people are billable people, right? In terms of some people are directly responsible for building revenue. So even though my agency might bill me, let's say you could be somebody making, you know, at an agency making $35,000 a year. You might be billed out at $100 an hour. You're obviously not seeing all of that because part of that $100 an hour goes to your salary, but part of it's going to the lawyers, part of it's going to your mailroom, part of it's going through the accounting team, part of it's going to rent, IT, right? So you have to think of like the equitable contribution everybody is bringing to the table, and you have to structure your relationship and your marriage around those strengths and attributes versus making a hard line. I have the money, therefore I make the decisions, because really there's so much more that goes into making the home move, right? And I think each of us have different strengths. Like one of the things we quickly realized, using that car as an illustrative example, I keep things in my head. Like I can come up with a vision, come up with a plan, and even execute it, and never tell Joy about it. And for 5 years, I have been like, sitting on this pile of money, and I had
no idea.
No idea. And it's not that I wasn't hiding it because it was just kind of there. Like I didn't have a car note. The money wasn't like tucked away in an account, like on an offshore account or in a crypto wallet or anything like that. It was just, I'm gonna just, instead of going towards Toyota Motor Corp, it's just gonna, now stay in my Capital One account.
Yeah,
just
and like when you say that, it's like, oh, that makes sense, but it's like something I just didn't think about. It's like a lot of stuff going on in my head. I didn't think, oh, he doesn't have a car note, he's gonna stack this. Even if he just would have said like, I'm going to stack this money, I no longer have a car note, then I could have equated, I would have understood. But it's just things that you don't think to say. I feel like you might have assumed that I would have known that, because it does make sense. Like when you 100%. Say it out loud, it makes sense. Like, oh, okay, but I didn't. It's just something that didn't cross my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what, the beauty that, this whole thing helped me see is, the focus had always in my mind been on financial impact, right? If I do X, what's the financial benefit we're going to experience, right? I think, Joy, what I love about you is you think about the financial impact, but I think more so like the emotional impact. Like, what is this going to mean if we, every time we throw a birthday party for the kids, I'm like, we don't need to do a birthday party. Why are we doing yet another birthday party? And Joya's like, I love them, and I want to do these parties. And I'm like, okay, so how can we meet in the middle and still throw a party and manage the cost, right? So for our oldest, his 7-year-old birthday party, we just had it at the house and ordered 2 pans of shark fish and chicken and had some hot dogs. And it turned out to be, cupcakes and other, stuff, whatever. And it turned out to be a good party, right? So and then we invited all his close friends. So he loved it. I loved it because of the cost, and then Joy got what she wanted. But that was, so we're going to introduce a new term. So as strategic partners, we figured out, on Black and White, birthday party, check. Fiscally, financially sound, check. But then, Joy understanding I don't necessarily want to do a party. Me understanding Joy wants to do a party. We are introducing this concept of being true partners. A true partner, you're really concerned about providing more than your partner, right? If each of us are concerned about providing more than the other, we'll always be trying to provide for the good of the relationship, and it won't be transactional, right?
And the business wins.
Correct.
Yeah.
In strategic partnerships, when you're moving, especially like even when you're, when you're single, you're moving as one business. Most people have their own apartment condo, so you're focused on keeping the lights on and the fridge full of that place. When you get in a relationship, you slowly but surely start keeping more of your stuff at each other's place. And then you reach a point like we should just be in one place, which is what Joy and I did, before we got engaged. But once I knew, she was going to be by me for the rest of my life, and she found her way to Chicago, it was like, yeah, we should just live together. And then it started shifting to, instead of her focusing on the Joy business, me focusing on the Coley business, it slowly shifted to becoming our business. And when you look at that, that is what starts to form the real partnership. I think there was probably some yellow flags on both of us should have realized during that time, but we got so caught up in trying to execute a wedding and then new jobs and career opportunities that we didn't focus on it. And then once you had kids, it became real. But really, you have to, look at your marriage as a strategic partnership. But when you bring love into it, it becomes a real partnership because you're more focused on this business of this marriage versus the business of how do I make sure I'm protected?
Yeah. And it's a deep conversation, but I would just say, when you think, if you just strip away like marriage and all that and just think about like a business, it's like businesses have deadlines. Like, like in my job, I know the fiscal year is going to end July 30th. I know there's time frames when you can't spend money. There's time frames when you get the money. It's time frames when you have to submit the budget or whatever. And I think in some ways you have to set up those guardrails with money within your relationship and marriage, because It's like when he purchased that car, we had just bought a house. Like literally we just bought a house. So if it was like a business, I don't know if they would have made like that type of move at that time. So I think sometimes it's just like timing as well. Like if you're thinking about, it's just dealing with timing. And then you had like a lot of really good points. I think primarily when you're thinking about like your spouse and trying to meet their interests, there's 2 sides to the coin, because Coley is a saver. And I feel like you should be, for me on my hand, I could have did better because I was just like, he gonna take care of me. Like, I'm gonna be straight. And then in some ways when I feel like he wasn't in the way that I thought he should, those created arguments. But it's like, what am I contributing like to him in the same way? Like if I have a credit card and I take it to the almost limit of the credit card, that's kind of like hurting the business, because no matter what, if he has to bail me out, that's taking money away. It's like you have to both like you might not be contributing the same amount. Just like think about Shark Tank, like they do have to go to investors and they contribute or whatever, but it also matters, how do you use that investment? How do you use that contribution to like make the business like better?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's really leaning on each other's strength. It's very rare that each person in the relationship is going to be making the same amount of money. It's very rare that each person is going to have the same amount of time. Usually, the more money you make, the more hours you're spending at your job, right? The two are just interrelated because you're usually more, the more money you make, you're usually in a management position. So you have other stakeholders that you have to care for at work. So you might not have the same amount of time at home. You can't keep your relationship to a transactional piece because if as soon as I walk in, if you expect me to take care of the kids, and then as soon as I get up, I expect you to take care of the kids, it becomes transactional versus establishing a working pattern to make sure I'm doing what I need to do to make sure you feel that you can perform your job to your maximum abilities, and I can do the same.
Yeah, it's like this. It's like a org chart. It's like having reasonable workflows. Like,
yeah.
That's what you have to create.
It's more creating, within the org chart, creating a racy chart, and then
racy chart.
Racy, responsible, accountable, counseled, informed. In case you didn't know, racy. but it's really about making sure you don't make your relationship transactional, right? Because if you make it transactional, that means you're again more concerned about your interest versus the marriage's interest, right? So if it's like, oh, Joy, you're going out Friday night, well, I get to go out Saturday night. Well, I don't need to just go out Saturday night because you went out Friday. I'm going out with a purpose, so I'm doing it with a purpose. Or it might come out, you need to go out Friday and Saturday night. That doesn't mean I get the next two, but it's just something that you keep in perspective. So I think we've done a great job setting up reasons 1 through 3 with it's not personal, it's marriage. But reason number 4 is probably I'll call it the curveball that hit a lot of us. It's because your children say so.
Your kids say so. So you can't. Yep. It's not personal. It's a marriage, and like eventually you become. It's like the business of you, me, and you. But then like the kids are almost. I don't know if they would be franchise owners, but it's like you're expanding the business.
Exactly. Yeah. They're probably the key or the crown jewel asset within your relationship, and they really need. Especially in a marriage, they really need the business to be functioning at its maximum potential because they require so many other resources, financial resources. You have to buy bigger homes. You're going to have to spend money on education. You might spend more money on a home to get, closer to a good school. I think it's, we're going to come back and do another podcast, probably our next episode about, the home buying process and finding schools, which is going to be a good one. But yeah. I think just the level of cooperation and collaboration that you need with a true partner once you have kids to make the marriage work becomes necessary. And if you haven't quite figured things out, it's going to be a bumpy road. And I think our road, we've been parents. This is year 7. I think the road was a little bit bumpier because I think in some ways we were partners. I don't even know if we were strategic partners. We were operating partners and the business was good. But once, you hit a few curveballs, unemployment, children, another child, family issues, like you realize like, oh, wow, this partnership and bond isn't as tight as it could have been, as it should have been. Some of the times when you were single, it should have been more long-term strategic planning with key milestones, right? Like as children, they blow it all up. But if you do that, if you have good prior proper planning, you're gonna be in a good place.
Or even like the vision, like even like literally at my job right now, where I'm in these random long ass trainings about writing a damn vision, writing a vision statement, mission statement. This department has been in place who knows how long, but now we got to revamp the vision, revamp the mission statement. That's the same when you have kids. You shouldn't just keep going on the same trajectory. Like you need to set new goals. You need a new vision. You need a new mission statement, and you have to be aligned with that as well. It's very important.
It is. So I think we hit a lot of good points.
I think my only last point that I really do want to say, since we're like driving home business, but like marriages do have ups and downs, and I would like people do have start a business and it fails. Like people have businesses, they might have this brilliant idea and they have to try a couple of times before it really like takes off and takes off the ground. Like in some ways with marriage, it's similar. Like you're gonna fail at stuff, but it's like, are you gonna keep trying to get to that original goal? Like, I don't want to say don't give up. That's like cliche, but it's like if this is a passion, something within you, like if you might have some failures, you might fail, but it's like let's revamp the business, get new investors, try it again. It's like
you pivot, new things, new disruptions happen all the time. Think about it. People don't think about it this way. Like Nike has failed at stuff, right? So the business of Nike is, booming and bigger than it ever has been. But they have failed at several different enterprises. It doesn't mean you blow up Nike. It means you recalibrate, you pivot, and then you go from there. The internet changed Nike's business. We all have the sneakers app. I'm gonna try to get those Jordans 12s today at 12:15 if I'm able to get through, which I'm confident, I'm believing, right? But when you think about it, right, like Nike owned Cole Haan, Nike owned was it Hurley and a couple of other brands, and the stuff just it distracted them from the core business of athletes and performance. So they sold Cole Haan, right? They let Cole Haan keep their lunar technology, but it didn't work for them anymore. They didn't want to have to operate. That was a completely new, different business segment. So you pivot, you go. You have several companies, who don't do it. Sears, they didn't catch up with the internet. They focused on their Craftsman and Kenmore brands and didn't evolve their customer experience fast enough, and that let other players come into the market and take their lunch. It happens. Just like with the marriage, but a business that's putting each entity in a place to perform on their greatest strengths are going to stand the test of time. We can't, if we've identified that if Coley is the saver, Joy is the executor, let's put us both in a position like, Joy, you have something you want to execute, then let Coley sit down and come up with a plan to make sure we can get there financially. Or if Joy has something she wants to do and we can't get there, well, let's have that conversation versus getting halfway down the road and saying, I told you so, right? Which is what we tend to do. And then do it begrudgingly. We figure it out begrudgingly and then just build animosity, because that's not a true partnership. The true partnership, the word true comes in. That's what love is.
Oh,
right?
my gosh.
It's wanting to do for the other person more than you want to do for yourself. But if each of us are doing that, it'll all equalize itself out and the business will move forward.
Yeah, and I mean, like, too, like, if you're stripping away that emotion, it's like a lot of money, it's like I'm afraid. And because I'm afraid of how it's going to pan out, and maybe I have my prior history with my family, you attack. You get into attack mode, so it's important. There is a soul to money. It's like a book called The Soul of Money, and it talks about like how you view money, how it impacts your life, and how your emotions are attached to it. I mean, it's just how it is. And I like how you brought up the example of Sears or just other businesses. Like a great example is what businesses are going to bounce back after the pandemic, and like which ones aren't. And in some ways, you have to be able to also take the feedback. Like if you're going to do a focus group, data, whatever, collect this data, and everybody's saying like, yo, this is garbage. And then you just keep serving the garbage. And then you're like, why'd my business close? I mean, it's like you got to be able to also take like that feedback, even if it hurts, and like try to make those adjustments to like make it work. Yep. That's with a business, or that's in life, or that's in a marriage as well. Like I feel some people, that pride gets in the way.
Absolutely.
And as they say, pride comes before the fall, and it's tough though. It's tough not to want to be right. You know, it's hard. But
it's tough for things to be going well, and then they're not all of a sudden. Like Peloton was on fire less than a year ago because nobody wanted to go to the gym anymore, so it made sense.
And they couldn't go to the gym.
And they couldn't, so Peloton was on fire. Now that things are opening back up, and apparently COVID never existed because we don't have to wear masks anywhere, Peloton is struggling. Like, they've had to let go of thousands of employees. They had to cancel orders on bikes, and they need to start making rowing machines now. So, if you don't take away anything else from this episode, it's a business. Like you do in your business, sit down, have meetings, talk about your goals, talk about your progress, and if it's not where it needs to be, recalibrate, pivot, and go for it.
Yeah, sums it up.
Cool. So, as we like to wrap up every episode, we want to hit you guys with things we wish we would have known. It's just a quick little, segment that Joy and I get to get personal and talk about like a life lesson or a bump that we've taken. That if we would have known this nugget, it would have been easier. Things I wish I would have known. I'll kick it off today.
Okay.
I wish I would have had this episode and known all this information 12 years ago when we started dating. I think we would have built plans, planned our wedding differently, because a lot of couples, we paid mostly for our wedding out of our own pocket. It was, I'll say it was 31 G's that came out of our
own pocket.
Imagine if we did that a little differently and even just saved 20 G's. Like, buying our first home probably would have looked a lot different. The number of moves we would have had to make would look different. But just understanding that you have to move, we all know we have to move from a me to we, but what does that really mean? What does that look like? And that means identifying strengths, weaknesses, and being able to live in that and being able to pivot your marriage as things go along. I wish I would have just had that nugget in me. Just in me, because I think a lot of the communication, a lot of the assumptions I made would have not been made, and we would have just had more conversations and goal setting.
And yeah, it's something I wish I would have known is how to conversate about money. I feel like that skill was never taught to me. It's a nuance to how you talk about money, how you bring up conversations about spending. It's a way of doing it in like strong arming or being angry or being fearful or being passive or not really setting boundaries around money can cause like a lot of issues. It's like knowing how to talk about money. Like, I'm still learning that. And nothing in society teaches us that. Mainly if you watch movies, they talk about the man cheats or the man does this or whatever. There's not a lot of conversations or movie or anything you see about conflicts with really money. And if it is a conflict with money, it's like extreme. And I think that's the one thing I would have wished I'd known better, like how to bring up money, how to talk about it in like a more positive way.
Exactly. So there's no passive stuff happening. So yeah, I think that's a great nugget. So.
Yeah. This is a good one.
Good
there you go.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody podcast. It's not personal, it's marriage. Episode 22. And we out.
Peace.